Hello and welcome to Flat Earth and Other Hot Potatoes. I'm Patricia Steer, and this is episode number 259. My guest is Sam Gerrans. He lives in Russia, where it's just after 5 a.m., so he's been kind enough to wake up early. He's married, he's a father, he's also an Englishman, a linguist, and he investigates the Quran without any pre-existing allegiance to the religion called Islam. The Quran agrees with the Hebrew Bible in many cases, as Sam has learned in his research. He was born and raised Christian, so he has several perspectives. He's accurately and thoroughly translated the Quran and discovered within its pages no mention of a globe Earth or the Copernican model, let alone anything relating to what NASA tells us. Instead, the Earth is described as basically flat and stationary. He's done several videos on flat Earth, but also touched on some topics that I find very interesting, and I'm sure you do as well. Narcissism, celebrity culture, feminism, food as a weapon, pornography, marriage, chemtrails, Bitcoin, and more. His channel is not just about Islam or the Quran. It's a very wonderful, deep resource for many different things. The Quran, A Complete Revelation, is the name of his full translation of the Quran, and it's available free to download on YouTube. It's in the upper right-hand corner of every one of his videos, but I put a link in the description box as well as to his channel and some other things that you might be interested in. Sam, good morning. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Patricia. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'd like a transcript of that. I think I'll use that in the future. That was excellent.
Look at us with our special microphones here, you and me.
Yeah, we are the Microphone Club. I expect as we go through this conversation that I'll start knocking it about as I start waving my hands. But for now, it's in place. So, yeah, let's do it. Great. Thank you for having me on the show.
Well, in the conspiracy world, waving your hands around would lead some to find, as they freeze frame your video, that you're making Masonic hand gestures. So I think you should sit on them for the remainder of the interview for your own good.
I'll do my best.
Well, hello to everybody in the live chat. Please subscribe to Sam's channel, like I said in the description box, and give the video a thumbs up because you know you're going to like it. And if you're watching at a later date, feel free to share it among your friends. All right. So an Englishman in Russia translating the Quran. Wow, that's kind of odd. How did this happen?
Kind of odd is a good description, Patricia. It really is. Yeah, there isn't really a sort of a template for I suppose the life lived deliberately. Well, Russia, my degree was in Russian, and so Russia was a natural step after that. I set to myself the goal of becoming fluent in Russian many years ago. I'm 51 now, so I started my degree, I think, when I was about 21, something like that. But when I'd finished my degree, I didn't think I'd really finished. I mean, we can talk about universities and the relative merits of a university education later on if you wish, but I found university fairly limiting and limited, and I did Russian language and literature, and there was a big difference between the language, which there's no way of politicizing a verb, and the literature, which was heavily politicized, heavily politically corrected, if you would like to put it that way. So there was quite a tension between the two parts of the degree. But after that degree, I didn't speak Russian fluently, which is what I'd set out to do. So I came to Russia then, and this is now, I suppose, 25 something like that years ago. And in a way, Russia, I'm not a Russophile. I'm not one of these people who thinks Putin's going to save the world or anything like that. I'm quite realistic about how things are in the world. But the Russia of the 90s was a very, very tough place. And I grew up in a sort of left-wing dysfunctional family. I mean, is there any other kind of left-wing family? I grew up in a sort of supposedly progressive family where everything's relativistic and it's all about feelings and so on. I came to Russia, which is a really brutal, certainly was then more, very brutal, and a brutal place going through a lot of changes. It was almost like after a war scenario. Suddenly nobody cares about your feelings anymore, and you just have to deal with reality, a very, very tough reality. And it made me grow up very fast. And in some ways, in that way, I'm very thankful to Russia. So that was the background. And then I got sort of sucked into Russian life. I now do speak Russian fluently, which was part of my goal. And I've spent, I suppose, about 15 out of the last 20 years here. So that's my connection with Russia. I have lived outside of it. We've lived in Spain. We've lived in England for a couple of years, lived in Georgia for a year. I've lived, in various places, but Russia. My wife is Russian, so it's somewhere that we've all got documents to go and live in. So that's one of the reasons as well. But I'm not a Russophile. I'm not, sort of a cheerleader for Putin or anything like that. I don't have any illusions about how things are in the world. But that's my connection with Russia.
You've mentioned on your channel and even on the printed part of your channel that you got into studying the Quran, but you don't have any affiliation with the religion called Islam.
Far from it.
Explain that to people, because you grew up Christian, but here you are doing something that most people who grew up Christian would have never thought to do.
I've always been a believer, in inverted commas. And my opinion is that you're kind of born the way you're born. And I've spent a lot of time talking to atheists and so on. And when they tell me they don't believe in God, I don't think they're lying. I think they're telling me the truth. But I'm not made that way. I'm born. I look around me and I see a creation. I see myself as created. Any philosophy which does not have that as its base, to me, I can't comprehend it because of the way that I'm built. And I think Emerson says there comes a time in every man's education where he has to fundamentally accept himself for who he is. And this is who I am. And although I've grown up in an atheistic, anti-God, anti-moral, degenerate society, and it is degenerate, there's no question about it, the soul that's been put into me inclines to truth, inclines to God. And I grew up in a Christian society, well, a nominally Christian society, in free fall, in moral free fall, which really started around the time of the First World War, stepped up in the Second World War, and now is all out degenerate. I mean, anyone who lives in the West, just look around you.
Yeah, you can just use your iPhone and watch free porn anytime, 24 hours a day.
And well, I mean, we can get into how relativistic it all is now. Men are women, women are men, and so on. I'm not made that way. If people genuinely believe all this stuff, they're very different to how I am. I'm built differently to this. I'm differently constructed. So there are still elements within the society, within British society, certainly when I was growing up, which is quite a long time ago now. We're talking 40, 45 years ago when I was a little boy. And so when I became old enough to reach the sort of the lower reaches of the age of reason, if you would have it. I mean, my family's not Christian. My family is they're liberals. They'll believe whatever the media tells them fundamentally.
Right. Richard Dawkins, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Nye.
Maybe not to that extent. I mean, I suppose if they'd been alive 100 years ago, they would have been Christians. But liberals are what Christians turned into when they lost their religion. They feel gushy about stuff and want to help people, but they haven't really worked out why or how or anything like that. It's mainly a feelings-based religion, and there's not much you can do to reason with it because you can't reason with a feeling. They're just different things. But when I started to look for God, then coming from a Christian background, I went to the Bible. And I mean, I've read all kinds of stuff, but I read the Bible and I read it very thoroughly. And the first book that I read of the Bible was Ecclesiastes, which I read today. I read the Bible on a regular basis. I still read the Bible. I mean, I see it in maybe perhaps a different light. But when I read the book of Ecclesiastes, it's a book of philosophy. And it closes with the words, let us hear the summary or the whole of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. And after reading Ecclesiastes and reaching this conclusion of a very, very wise book, I thought, I agree with this. And I made the mistake that a lot of people make, which is to think of the Bible as a book, as one book. And it isn't. It's a library. It's a collection of various scriptures in various states of various conditions of veracity and so forth. And I rather allowed myself to be corralled into a worldview that didn't feel right. And I always had some reservations about it, the Christian teachings I'm talking about specifically. But I suppose I kind of thought that it was a requirement of God, because I'm built this way. I'm built with this desire for God, that somehow you had to kind of overcome this. This was a doubt of some kind, and that the fighting the good fight meant you had to overcome your own basic common sense. And I sort of embraced the Christian view, and very enthusiastically so, and tried, for a couple of years, I certainly would have identified as a Christian and committed myself to work, associated with that. But I always had this internal doubt, specifically about the Trinity, specifically about the kind of feeling aspect of it, when reason wasn't really a part of any of this. And I reached, I'm still quite young at this point, about 21 by this point. I reached a point where I thought, I can't continue with this. This doesn't make sense. And I felt too that I'd been duped. And I made the commitment to myself that I would never let anything past the gates of my own intellect that I hadn't personally sort of, gone through with a fine tooth comb. And I also saw how religions work. And once you've seen one, you've kind of seen them all. They all work basically the same way. And it's all a lot to do with normalcy bias. People in groups subsuming their individual abilities into some groupthink. And I've never been a groupthink thinker ever. But this my attempt at it wasn't very successful. So that was my sort of Christian background, and I do know the Bible very well, and I have a lot of time for the Bible. There are parts of the Bible that I continue to read and I love, but I can see where its contradictions lie and so forth. But that was my sort of Christian experience. And after that, I put aside any kind of religious reading and decided to embark on one of the least popular things of all time, which is to think for myself. And I've continued to do that ever since. And through reading and thinking, eventually I came to the Quran, which I could talk about, separately. But that was my Christian, sort of, as it were, experience.
I do want to talk about, most definitely, since this is a flat earth and other hot potatoes, other conspiracies or alternate ways of thinking show, the Quran and the flat earth aspect. But I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, how did you stumble upon the flat earth? Was it through the Quran, or was it because of a video on YouTube?
No, it was due to my friend Dave. Hello, Dave. I'll send you a link to this, I expect, later. Dave is a chap that I've known since I was about 14 or 15. We grew up in the same, well, I spent some time in the town that he grew up in. I've moved around and moved around and moved around, but I've known this chap Dave for a long time. He's not, university educated kind of guy. He's a very bright guy. He's a very bright guy, and I respect him. And he's a Christian, incidentally. And I was forced through circumstances several years ago back to this town, which is where my mother lives. And I bumped into him, and it was really nice to see him. And we chatted, and we'd done a lot of the same. You see, the internet happened since we last really talked, he and I. And we realized we were very much on the same page. We understand what's going on in the world. I mean, the big picture and the lies of it all and the manipulation and so on. He didn't mention it to me there at all, but he sent me a link a couple of weeks later.
So he felt you out first, found out where your head was, and then thought,
yes,
Sam's ripe for the picking. Let me send him this flat earth video.
No, I mean, he could see that I haven't spent my internet years looking at porn and watching football, put it that way. I have an index finger and some eyes, and I've been using this time very efficiently because I understand that this is not forever. This is a window of opportunity, and I'm curious. I've always wanted to know, so I've spent this time. He and I had read a lot of the same things and come to a lot, not all, but a lot of the same conclusions. And I respect him. He's a thorough, intelligent guy with slightly different perspectives on some things from me, and that's fine. But he sent me some links, and when I got them, I went, Dave, I do respect you, man, but perhaps this is a step too far. But I had to think. I thought, well, I mean, because of my background, see, growing up partly in Russia as an adult, and realizing Russia and the West, this is one thing. This has always been a deception. There's never ever been not at the top level. There's never been any real enmity between these two things. They're both controlled by the same people. I had understood about chemtrails, the food, the injections, all of this stuff. What do I really know? What do I really know about the shape of the Earth? I mean, as a sort of an aside, I'm fascinated by real science. I mean, stuff that's real. And I had tried a couple of times to learn about astronomy. And I'd attempted to read books. I'm talking about mainstream books, Ball Earth, all of this stuff, gravity, everything. Books about the solar system and the stars. And I couldn't learn it. And I flatter myself I'm reasonably bright. I couldn't learn it. I couldn't get it into my head. And the reason why I couldn't get it into my head is because I couldn't understand it. And the reason I couldn't understand it is because it doesn't make sense. It's as simple as that. I can't learn something that doesn't make sense. It's just the way I am, and it doesn't make sense. Anyway, he sent me these links, and I thought I'll spend a day on it. Just out of respect and for old time's sake.
That's what they all say. I'll just look at this for a minute. This flat Earth video.
I know. I spent a day on it. My wife was looking worried. I spent another day on it. I thought, all right, I'll give it a week. So I spent a week on it. And when I say on it, I don't mean I listened to Eric Dubay. I'm personally grateful to Eric Dubay. He's 200 Proofs. It's fantastic.
Yes.
Eric Dubay has gone out and basically made it accessible to the iPhone generation, the work of people from 100 and 150 years ago. And he doesn't hide this. I mean, you hear people say, oh, he's stolen this. No, he hasn't stolen it.
He hasn't stolen it, no.
Nothing at all. No, he's done a great thing. And I looked at sort of the YouTube level, but then I sort of dug into the more the written word, Samuel Rowbotham and people like that. And then we happened to be living, it was in northern Spain at that point, in Galicia, but we happened to be near the sea. So I hadn't come across this thing where you draw perspective across the sea because this was the big proof that I always thought. I can remember my grandmother telling me, ships go down hull first. That's the horizon. That's the curve of the earth. I thought that was true because it looks true. But just because it looks true doesn't mean it necessarily is true. And I hadn't come across those sorts of videos or anything, but I worked out myself, well, that must be the case. If this is all right, if it really is 8 inches per mile squared and that this is perspective, then you must be able to draw a ship back up from the horizon. And I went down to the sea and I did it using a camera. And that was the fact that I'd done that myself. And then I did some more experiments with water. I'm a flat waterist. I don't care what people say about the earth, but water lies flat. It just does.
It's really the biggest proof.
It is the proof. And you can go, and again, I'm not sort of an Eric Dubay fanboy or anything, but he says it so well. It's not so much what the shape of the earth is. It's more about the lie and that you can check this. We can't check 9/11. We can't go and dig up all the buried evidence that they took off to China. We can't check who killed,
JFK,
Kennedy, etc. We don't have access to that. But you can go and check where the water lies flat. You can check that. You can do it. And if it does, the implications of that are so huge. It means that Russia and America have never been at war. It means that the whole thing is fake from beginning to end. Now, I was almost there anyway with all of that, but this was even, this even cracked my shell at this point. So I continued looking into it, and I think there were moments of realization, and I don't remember them all, but I do remember one particular point where I thought, I'm going to take this very seriously. And it was, I watched the press conference of NASA when they supposedly put a tin can on Mars.
Oh, yes.
And I didn't know who these people were. You see, and we can get into this later, but I happen to have a background in quite a high level in public relations. So I do know how events work and actors work. And I thought, these guys, not only are they actors, they're not very good. And in fact, they're not meant to be very good. From a mind control point of view, the fact that a lot of this propaganda isn't very good is people think that they're making mistakes. They're not making mistakes. It's not meant to be very good. And the reason why it's not meant to be very good is because basically once you've bought into the lie, your own brain then starts filling in the spaces, and they want you to do that because no one can deceive you like you can.
That makes a lot of sense.
It works. It's not obvious to people like us who've been trained in the linear way of thinking, but the people at the top, they don't think like that. They don't think in a linear way. They think in a three-dimensional way, and they're very clever. They're very bright. And they're right about an awful lot. But anyway, I looked at this, and I looked at this teddy boy guy who's supposed to be head of engineering of this
Yeah,
project.
looks like Elvis Presley's cousin or something.
It's privilege. But I thought, I've never worked for NASA, and I seem to know more about this project than you do. It was embarrassingly bad, and the contrast between the journalists who clearly believe this nonsense. I mean, oh, please tell us about this amazing thing, and they're all hyped up about the wonders of this, and you could see that, just if you have intuition, I could see the contrast between the two sides of the podium there, and I thought, this is nonsense. This is not even very good nonsense, and so that was one point. But I suppose I spent about 300 or so hours on it, and also you have to understand, for me, it wasn't such a huge thing to. I mean, a lot of people. I've already lost all the friends I'm ever going to lose through what I do, and family members and so on. If you tell 1.5 billion Muslims that they don't understand the Quran, here's why. Offending a few kind of geeky NASA fanboys is small potatoes to me. So once I'd worked out that this was the case, yeah, I'm on board. That's right. So this isn't the main thing that I'm about. I mean, in my work, my 536,000 word work, which is the Quran, a complete revelation, I think I dedicate like 3 small paragraphs to this point. I've made two or three out of like 200 videos about this. So I don't spend my time on forums about the flat Earth in the same way as I don't spend my time on forums about the fact that Tuesday comes after Monday. I already know it. I've worked it out. Yeah, I get it. I'm moving on now. So, but yeah, it is true. It is, and you can confirm it and get a camera and go and look at water, but dealing with the psychological implications of this, I can understand why that's so hard for people. See, I was always awake. I've always been somewhat alienated from the mainstream point of view. So, but if you haven't been, if you've been, like a middle streamer, one of these people who's, cozily part of it all of your life, and then you're faced with the implications of a lie this big, I can see why people run away from it. I really can, and I don't blame them. I understand, but for me, yeah, I get it. It's true, and water lies flat. Yeah, it's incredible, but we've been lied to again.
What you said about the fact that the people that are just cozily going along, not even going along to get along, they just believe everything that they hear in the news. That's why those people don't really wake up. And that's why people who from the beginning were at some level awake can wake up so much quicker and so much easier, which is why a lot woke up when videos started coming out in 2015, because it was like, this explains everything.
It is terrifying to certain types of people, and again, it's quite hard for somebody like me because I have almost an antagonistic streak to me, and I'm brutally interested in truth. But there are some truths that I'm not interested in, as we talked about when we got to we talked the other night. Medical stuff. I'd rather die than know the diagnosis. I don't want to know. I'll just close my eyes and stick my fingers in my ears. And if it weren't for my wife, I probably wouldn't be here. So I do understand not wanting to know about certain things that are just too painful, too difficult, too uncomfortable to look at. Just for me, the reason why we're here and what we're doing and what's really going on isn't the kind of subject that makes me feel that way. But for a lot of people, it does. And especially if they've grown up in an environment where they understand, in fact, in some ways they're correct. They do understand that if they face the inescapable conclusions of what they're looking at, this is going to have consequences. It means that they can no longer just be a part of it. They're now going to be an internal exile, and that's what happens. And I've kind of always been one, so this isn't new to me, but they are right. And the whole waking up thing is, see, I don't believe that this is going to happen to a lot of people, and I don't believe that. I think the elite don't care. They know that it's between 2 and 5% of people can think for themselves. We've been very well studied, and they know that most people would rather die than embrace an unpopular truth. And they're right. they would rather die than embrace an unpopular truth. In fact, they have died in their millions rather than face an unpopular truth all through history. So the people who run this, that they know this about us. They know that there are going to be these mavericks, this 2 to 5%, and then there'll be the sort of the hangers on, and then there'll be the deceivers and hypocrites and all these types of, these archetypes. This is all known. So I don't think at the top they really care. But yeah, some people are waking up, and YouTube is painful.
Well, that's probably why we're allowed to be on YouTube, because if they thought there was any danger of the world waking up, even any sort of video with any truth in it would not be allowed at all. So
that's true. And I have noticed, especially in the flat earth thing, and I must say again, this is not my main.
You've done 2 videos, I think.
2 or possibly 3 on flat earth, and so that's like, about 1% of the videos I've made, and that's about the amount that it occupies of my main major interests. But what I have seen is that they're really pushing, when you look now in YouTube and check out Flat Earth, they're promoting people who are basically feeding the fears of the people who have got questions, and they're there with all the mainstream answers. So YouTube is certainly working to flatten, for want of a better word, this subject. Yes. They don't want it to get too big. That's true, because I think what happens with the flat earth and why it's so different to everything else is because you can prove it. You just have to stop name calling and stop reacting and just calm and go into this thinking to yourself, I am, well, in my case, I'm a grown-up man. I'm going to investigate this with an open mind. And then I'm going to check it for myself, and then I'm going to deal with the conclusions, whatever they are. Anyone who does that is going to stop name calling, and then they're going to realize the scale of the deception. And it also means that people's lives now are fairly meaningless. If you spent your life chasing a career in, X, and you're 50, and now you're going to have to face the fact you've been deceived. And this is how cults work. If you look at, I really recommend that everyone just investigate a cult, pick a cult. I personally really like the Jehovah's Witnesses. I spend a lot of time.
They're nice.
Yeah, nice doesn't mean anything.
Right.
And nice is overrated. And the Jehovah's Witnesses is a cult. There's no question about it. And the way that cults work, and the denial that people go into when they're faced with the proofs of the inconsistencies and lies of the things upon which they've based their lives. There's a great line in a film, American Beauty, where the young guy who's speaking to the main character, he says about his father, whose father won't look at the fact that this young guy's got all this from. He said, never underestimate the power of denial. And that's the truth. And that power of denial, psychologists who know how we work, they use that against us. And that's why none of this proof that they present, the moon landings and all this other stuff, that's why it doesn't have to be very good. Denial kicks in, and no one can deceive you like you can. It's very clever. They don't try very hard, because with NASA's budgets, right, they could make much better stuff than they're actually making.
Well, the same as when you see the hoax events or false flag events, and I know that that's something you've touched on, they're done pretty poorly. And with the budget that they probably have, they could do much better, but they don't need to, because they know we will, I don't mean us, but that most people out there who've been mesmerized by the media will just fill in the blanks on their own and believe whatever they're told.
Yes, and you said it very well, mesmerized and fill in the blanks. And the filling in the blanks, they've worked out, I believe, that it's much better if they leave some blanks for you to fill in. Because the people who are already bought into the cult, who don't want to leave it, and it is a cult, it only makes sense as a cult, and that's why you should study a cult of any kind. It doesn't matter which one, because they're all kind of the same, is that the sort of, as it were, the cult member starts to fill in those blanks himself. And that means that he gains ownership over it, because he filled in those blanks are his, and he's going to defend those blanks. That's how it works. And also, when you start to see, having worked in public relations where you have campaigns, you see, it's not just like one event. you have a campaign that stretches over however long, however how much the client's money is. I would see 9/11 as part of a campaign that goes back to JFK and beyond. So once people buy into the little lie, well, not little lies, but relatively easier ones to buy into, then when you get to 9/11, when it was so obviously, I mean, bizarrely stupid. I mean, I thought the official line was going to be that Bin Laden had got in there in the night and, kitted this whole place out with bombs and managed to.
That would be believable.
It would
I
make
mean, sort
it would
of.
make some sense, but what they came up with is so unbelievable. Because people who bought into the Oklahoma bombings and all the other things, all the other events that they've done, it's a step-by-step process. You buy into a little one and a bigger one and a bigger one and a bigger one. And so they're working on this like 20, 30, 40-year timeline. They're not just doing one event. One event, if they did one event out of the blue, I want to go, whoa, what's going on? No, it doesn't work like that. You bought into the last one and the one before that. Now you see, you're not fighting them, you're fighting you. That's how it works. They get you fighting yourself. You can't win that one. It's very, very hard because you have to admit, I was wrong, I was stupid, I was duped, I've been in a cult, and now I'm going to wake up. People won't do it. You can talk to a Jehovah's Witness and say, look at the Australian Commission, which proves all of these child abuse cases and so on. And even leaving that aside, just simply the doctrinal points that Jehovah's Witnesses hold to, which cannot be true and can be proved to be true. 1914 was supposed to be Jesus coming back, and then 1918, 1928, 1954, 1995.
It sounds like NASA and their plans to do things in the future. Just keeps kicking they keep kicking the can down the road. Same thing.
Absolutely, that's right. They do. And once you've bought into it, it becomes it's not so much about NASA, it's about you. It's not so much about Jehovah's Witnesses, it's about you. And this is how all cults work. They are religions, they're cults, and this is how we've always been controlled. And these are arts, and the ruling elite understand these arts extremely well because they don't outnumber us. They don't outpower. Haven't got. If everybody really did decide to wake up and do something about it, not that I believe that for a single second, but if they did, then we're being controlled by a very small number of people. So they need arts, and these are the arts that they teach their sons. Not the nonsense we get in school. They're taught how to rule the herd, and with the herd, and this is how you rule it. And these not only are they very good at it, they keep records and they keep learning, and there are a series of recipes that repeat through history. And there's nothing much new under the sun, but they are refining those. And now, of course, they've got the technology so that rather than having to eavesdrop on us individually, they're just data mining everybody's stuff from the internet, so they know what everybody thinks. And if anything was really dangerous, they put out a false flag about this or blah blah blah. We're controlled by signs and symbols, and that's how it works. And anyone who's studied any cult will tell you this is how it works. And this is a cult. I had to come to realize that when you're talking to your family members and friends and so on, you are dealing with cult members. It only makes sense in those terms, and it's a very lonely place to be, because you a bit like Plato's cave. You've got up and left the cave and come back in to tell everyone, wow, the sun's outside, we can go in. And rather than greeting you with open arms, they turn around and start throwing stones at you. But this is how cults work. So when you start to see it as a cult, it does start to make more sense.
Yes, and it doesn't make it any easier, but it does make more sense. And, speaking of Jehovah's Witnesses, we've all probably seen a video or run across a person in our own life who has come out of the cult, and they never have anything good to say once they're free and once they see what was going on. They're traumatized.
Yes, and you were right in your comment before where you said that Jehovah's Witnesses are very nice people, and that they can be. And despite everything, a lot of them do manage to put lives together afterwards and so on. I've dealt with Jehovah's Witnesses, and the way that I deal with Jehovah's Witnesses is I take a piece of paper, and I never get into what I believe or try to sort of trade ideologies with them. They've come to me, I warn them, I say, look, you've got me on this is my sort of key subject here, so I'm giving you due warning, and you're not going to win this. If you really want to make a convert, go next door, go somewhere else, because you're not going to get very far with me. But if you want to talk, I'll talk with you. and they will talk to you because they're all on an hours basis. They're all trained. They all have to do a certain amount of hours to
Is
be
that
holy.
what it is?
Oh,
There's
yeah.
two nice women who knock on my door, and it's happened twice. I just thought they were nice Jehovah's Witness women who were brainwashed. But it's not really nice. It's that they're on the clock. Oh,
They're
wow.
on the clock. They do have to do a certain amount of hours per week. Otherwise, you stop being holy, and that can be a problem. So they're really basically watching the clock. Yes, and so you thought it was about you, but no, they're sort of looking at their watches. So what I do is, you see what Jehovah's Witnesses, and I'm not picking on Jehovah's Witnesses, all cults. I'm only using Jehovah's Witnesses as a sort of model, a template for all the other cults out there. Is like NASA, some of their answers can seem to make sense. Some of Jehovah's Witnesses' answers can seem to make sense, but they only make sense if you haven't got a memory. They make sense as long as you forget the answer to the previous question and then accept the next question on the basis of the assumed conclusions that they're now going to throw at you. But with Jehovah's Witnesses, what I do is we agree something. So this is what you're saying about point X. They say yes. I write it down. I ask them to initial it. Then we carry on to the next. And by the time you get to about 6 or 7 questions in, they're now telling you something which seems plausible if you're not able to follow an argument and haven't really got a memory. But the problem is you can't have that and point 1. Those two things cannot go together. They just can't. And I think and at that point they tend with me to sort of edge away, and because I'm sort of going on a bit too much about Jehovah's Witnesses, but you will then be seen as some sort of enemy of some kind, and your point of view is discounted on that basis. But with NASA, any cult, not Jehovah's Witnesses in particular, and there are some lovely Jehovah's Witnesses, and there's some great ex-Jehovah's Witnesses doing some very valuable work on YouTube. If you hold their feet to the fire and keep in your mind, write down what you have to believe. You see, going back to the globe thing, most believers in the globe don't know what it is that they have to believe in order to believe it. Like most Jehovah's Witnesses don't know what I know about their cult. Most Jehovah's Witnesses do not know, young Jehovah's Witnesses do not know that Jesus was supposed to be coming back in 1914, and then it was changed that they would be people alive when this happened, when Armageddon happened, and now it's over 100 years later. And what's happening is Jehovah's Witnesses keep kicking the can down the road and twisting it and changing it. But the Bible is very clear. If a prophet comes and makes a prophecy and it doesn't happen, you should not fear that prophet. He's a false prophet. It's in Deuteronomy somewhere, I believe. But you never underestimate the power of denial. Once they get you denying your own perceptions, they've got you. And that's how all religions work. Brand Islam works that way. Certain types of Christianity work that way. And the main cult, I don't know what to call it, the system cult, this matrix, which is a cult, it works that way too. And as anybody who's tried to talk to anybody that they care about something that they've discovered in the last 5 years knows.
Yeah, anything from specific things in religious texts to chemtrails to flu shots, GMO. You try talking to the people who are a member of this matrix cult. That's a great way to put it. That just covers everything. Yep. They're still plugged in and they don't want to unplug.
No, and you've got to understand why. And I understand why.
Well, it's not easy. Look, I mean, you lose friends, family, and you're alone. I mean, that's one of the reasons.
Yep, and the elite, the ruling elite, and in my worldview, we are ruled. Just as we were under Caesar, it's just through more layers of duplicity. They understand this about us. They know what the percentages are. That's why they gave us democracy, because they know that most people are stupid. And they're right. They're completely right. Most people won't do their due diligence. Most people just will go along to get along. And most people want to be liked. They want to be normal. They want to be accepted. They want to be loved. They want everything. They want the cozy version. And I agree. I'd like the cozy version too. But unfortunately, I'm hampered with this thing called intellect. So, but they know there aren't going to be very many of us. And that's why they're not bothered.
Well, with democracy, they give us that illusion that our vote is counting and that there's freedom of choice. And that illusion keeps many who are living in that matrix cult happy that they're really doing things. They're really changing things when in reality they're not. But you can find your own coziness and happiness as an awakening ex-Matrix cult member. I mean, you have a child and a beautiful Russian wife, and you're doing your own thing, following your passions and dreams. So it's not all that bad, but you kind of have to live outside of the fairy tale lifestyle that you grew up thinking was to be yours.
I never believed in the fairy tale lifestyle, but yes, I did have to give up certain things. I've also gained other things in this line of work. You see, you can come out against NASA, and they're not likely to send a parcel bomb to your house. Well, probably not. But if you explain to 1.5 billion Muslims, and not just this is my opinion, but you've done the due diligence and the work, and you've been through the Arabic of the Quran, why their religion is fundamentally at odds with the book which it claims as its foundational scripture, then I think you find life insurance a little bit harder to come by. But you get something for your money, as it were. You get integrity. And for me, I'm 51, right? I look around, and I'm middle-aged. It doesn't sort of trip off the tongue particularly easily, but it's true. I am middle-aged, but what I don't have, it's not only what I do have, it's what I don't have. I don't have the midlife crisis. I'm very, very happy. If I died tomorrow, the last thing I would have, in fact, I have it regularly, is gratitude. I've been given the opportunity, the intelligence and the time and the support to be able to fulfill my mission in life. And I think that that's what counts when you die. And I personally am convinced that this life is sort of precursor to what my grandmother would have called the fuller life. And so I'm not dazzled by this life. I'm all right with it, but I'm not sort of in a hurry to go anywhere else. But at the same time, this is, the Quran says this life is an illusion, and it's a delusion. It's the enjoyment of illusion, and it is true. If you look back over the last 20 years, where do they go? So our lives are really just a few seconds, and so I've had the opportunity to do that, and I'm very grateful for that. So, yeah, of course, if you've done what I've done, and we knew this when we discussed, hello, darling, well, I've got this idea, why don't we do this? I'll make myself unemployable for the rest of our lives, and we'll antagonize, we'll throw a hand grenade into the hornet's nest of the Islamic world. Are you with me? Sure, if you apply for a job in anything which isn't a taxi driver or a window cleaner, and they're going to look you up online. If it's anything which requires something which I can do or would be interested in doing, then you're not going to get the job, because there's going to be a choice between you and someone equally well qualified, or even not as well qualified, but is less likely to have a letter bomb sent to his place of work. Then they're going to take the second guy, and it's obvious why. So, yeah, of course, all of those things cut down to you. But in my case, I've been very, very blessed and count myself very fortunate that God has given us real supporters, people who help us in our work, including financially. I mean, it's not very much, but it's just enough so I can spend my time on this through book sales, and also people making usually small donations. That really, really helps. But if that stops, okay, it stops. We didn't do it for the money. Believe me, there are better ways of making a living in this world. But what I get is the non-financial side of it. In my worldview, I'm investing in the life to come. And so that's what I'm doing. It's not about making tons of money here. Anyway, this world, the more you learn about it, the less invested for me anyway, it's possible to be in it, given the way it's going and where it's undoubtedly going to go. And also, just as an aside, as part of my work, I have worked around exceptionally wealthy people financially. I'm talking billionaires. Just as part of my work, they weren't my personal friends. They weren't people I would go and hang out with or go to the bani with, but I have spent a lot of time around people like that. And when you've been, when you've flown in one, Gulfstream jet, you're kind of flown in them all. And after a while, you start to think, this isn't so great. they're walking on a very fragile surface, and there's nothing. I remember being on a plane with this particular billionaire. Again, he wasn't my friend; he was a client. But we were flying. I can't remember, Paris somewhere. I mean, I used to fly all over the place and stay in luxury places all the time, being treated because of my work in a very deferential way. And I was thinking all the time, this isn't me. This isn't who I am. This isn't what I was here to do. So yeah, I gave that up. But what I've gained has been immeasurably better. But I remember sort of sitting there and thinking, what this guy's got, this billionaire guy, thinking, what you've got, you can't keep. But what I've got and what I'm, going to invest my time in, I can't lose. So who's the better investor? And this would be the Quranic position on how you spend your life. You're investing in the life to come. And actually you get it here as well. But in a way, it frees you from, in Quranic parlance, the shaitan, this you've got to worry about money, worry about this, worry about that. And everybody has that. We had that. But I found, I've tasted and found that God is good. That's been my experience. We're not wealthy by any means, but we have enough to eat. We have somewhere to live. We're able to do work which is important. I'm not going to work every day slaving for some materialist atheist who all he wants is, more for him. I don't have to do that. And so I'm very, very grateful in a nutshell. I feel privileged.
You sign off your videos, and I'm going to butcher this, I'll paraphrase, that if you want good trees, you have to plant good seeds. And that's the process that you're in with your work now.
Absolutely right. And I think in the brand Islamic perspective.
And I do want to have you define what brand Islam is. You've mentioned it a few times, and I keep saying, I have to ask him about that.
I'm really talking about Sunniism and Shiism. When people talk about Muslim, that's what they're talking about. And I call it brand Islam because it's a brand. It's a brand like Coca-Cola or anything else. It's something which is being sold to them and to other people as a sort of defined character. And I don't believe in that. I don't believe in brand Islam. I mean, I'm not saying all people who are kind of traditionalist Muslims are bad people. Don't think that for a second. I know for a fact it isn't true because I've met some very nice ones and very good ones and very righteous ones. But I've also met righteous, Catholics and Protestants and all kinds of other people. So that's not the thing. I'm just saying that there's no one-to-one correlation between what they talk about. In fact, there is definitely not a one-to-one correlation between what they talk about and the Quran. So that's really the distinction. So these are separate things. I'm sorry, I'm afraid I've forgotten the point I was going to start with. So
I'm listening to every word you say, and then I forgot the point too, because what you were saying was so engaging.
About how I sign off my videos
yes, and well, that was part of it too. If you want good trees, you have to plant good seeds, and that's how you're living your life, preparing for what comes next. What did you say your grandmother called it?
The fuller life, and that's right, and that's really why I use that sort of signature at the end, because going back to the brand Islam thing, they tend to, and I get this, they're sort of looking for a mullah, they're looking for a
religious spiritual leader.
Yeah, and all I'm trying to do is say, I'm just an ordinary guy. I'm just a bloke. I'm just a guy like you. I'm using my brain and I'm doing the best I can. That's the example. It's this is going to sound ridiculous to you, but it sounds ridiculous to me. But within brand Islam, you see everything becomes very legalistic, So when you make this thing called wudu, it's just a ritual washing. Is it valid if a woman's wearing nail varnish at the time of washing her hands? I mean, this is Talmudic in its insanity. Okay, so I'll be asked things because people think, okay, he really knows the Quran, therefore they assume that you're presenting yourself as a sort of replacement for their last mullah. And I write back, I say, go for a long walk, think about it for yourself, engage your conscience, and make up your own mind. And people are like,
use your logic.
They've never heard this before. Yeah, use your own brain. I mean, the Quran does have laws. There's no question about it, but only about 3%, as far as I understand, of the Quranic is actually legal in any sense. And mainly it's to do, briefly, it's something called hudud Allah, which are the the boundaries. And these boundaries, I mean, there are some laws, but they're very few. And the Quran gives us these guidances between which we have to make up our own minds. And the making up your own mind and using your own brain thing, people would rather throw their heads against the wall than do this. They want to be told specifically what to do. And just, as long as you're not killing people on this side or denying God on that side, you can, this isn't some tiny rivulet. This is the Mississippi. You can swim where you like. And people don't like that. See, they want to be told precisely whether or not they can wash their hands with nail varnish on. And I say, don't come to me with that kind of nonsense.
So you've translated the Quran completely, and you've gone through and made sure certain words weren't being used differently. You've got a better way of saying it than that, but that's the point I'm trying to get across. That's time consuming and provides a lot of value to people who really want to know, not about wearing nail polish or not when you're cleaning your hands, but who really want to know what the true deep meaning of the Quran is.
You said it very well, and you're right. It is very time consuming. When I first read the Quran, there's a bit of a backstory. I was in Russia at this time. I missed the whole repurposing of Islam as the scary beardy guy with the dagger. When I was growing up, Muslims were kind of quiet people who either owned corner shops or, if they were better educated, worked in British Telecom. That was kind of it. None of this propaganda was a thing when
everyone's being beheaded right and left. Yeah,
that happened when I was away, so I missed all of that. I just happened to be out the country for 15 years, so I missed this whole thing.
Oh, good. You missed the propaganda.
I missed it. I just missed it. And I read the Quran. I read the Abdul Yusuf Ali translation, which is what the Saudis like. He was a Pakistani who ended up living in England, where eventually he died. He didn't speak Arabic or read Arabic, but he reworked various existing translations, so far as I know. And I had a copy of the Quran. I'd left it in England, and through various things I thought I must read that. And I went to England on a business trip, and I kind of found this copy that I had somewhere, brought it back to Russia, and I read it. And this whole thing, see, when I read it, I thought it made sense. Within Christianity, I'm not here to knock Christianity, but I know very clearly why I'm not Christian, or in the modern sense of the word. It's this: is it grace? Is it works? It is grace. It isn't works. Jesus saves you, but you've still got to work for yourself. It doesn't ever make any sense. And
I see what you're saying. Or is there a prerequisite of asking to have Jesus come into your heart? Is that what it is? There's so many things that contradict.
They do contradict. And
I just figure that's every religion, though.
Yes, but with every religion, what they do is they kind of assume their conclusions and work back from that, which Brand Islam does also. But when I started to read the Quran, the first, even in translation, the first couple of pages, I had answers to all these things. What the purpose of life is, you are here to we've been created that we should not, we should serve God. As I discovered, in Ecclesiastes, and that we are not to, God is one. This makes sense. And that whosoever believes in God on the last day and does good works has their reward. Christian, Jew, doesn't really matter. And the way the word in the Quran uses the word Muslim, it doesn't mean it's just incompatible with any kind of religion. Actually, as a brand, as a sort of a sectarian thing. So what I did is I read this whole thing through, and I was very impressed. Except you get to bits and you go, you could just feel that there's a dissonance, even reading it without knowing Arabic, reading it there. And because of my experiences with religions, I was being careful because I know how they work. So anyway, I went to Britain again on another business trip, and I thought I've got to find out more about this, because I was very, very impressed, and I understood these things from God, but I didn't know what extent. I got off the plane. I was on some sort of business thing. I didn't even go to the hotel. I went straight to an Islamic bookshop with my suitcase from the plane, and said, "What do I need to buy to understand all of this?" And to be fair to them, they were pretty nice. They weren't that impressive intellectually, but they were nice. They were friendly. And they loaded me up with all these books about hadith and the Islamic religion and all this stuff. As much as the money I had, I just lugged this, stack of books away. Couldn't wait to get out of this business thing. Got back to Russia and just read the lot. And I thought, nah, this is the same nonsense that I got out of from Christianity. Completely didn't make any sense. This hadith stuff didn't make any sense. It contradicts.
What does hadith mean for those of us who
I'm
don't
so
know?
sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, yeah. Hadith means narration or story. And you see, people who come from a Christian background may not appreciate this, but certainly from the Protestant background, where we have the tradition of sola scriptura, which is the scripture alone. So you come to the Bible and you read the Bible, and you're basing it on the scripture. That's not how Sunni Islam, or really Shia Islam, a bit different, but it's not how Sunni Islam works. It's got this secondary, supposedly secondary, but actually primary literature called the Hadith, which is all of the supposed sayings and actions of the Prophet Muhammad and what he supposedly said and did, as imagined or memorized or told by people, somebody who told somebody who told somebody who told somebody who told somebody that the Prophet Muhammad as-salatu alayhi wasalam said blah 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 blah. Okay, and then on the basis of all of this stuff, this is what the actual religion's based upon. It's nothing to do with the Quran. In fact, the product of this is anathema to the Quran. It's irreconcilable with it. But like with Christianity, the proponents of brand Islam assume it's their conclusions. They assume this religion and then say, yes, this is what the Quran was talking about. But I just read the Quran. I have a literature background. I'm used to reading a text with my brain engaged. Well, supposedly, I don't know what was left of that after university, but I'm used to dealing with texts, and that text that I'd read, even translated by somebody who was an adherent of traditionalist Islam, I could see there's no way these two things are reconcilable. They're talking about completely different narratives. So I thought the only way to get to this is I really have to learn Arabic, which I already speak fluent Russian, so I wasn't intimidated by another language. I don't speak Arabic, but I read Quranic Arabic in the same way as a Greek scholar might read ancient Greek, or a Hebrew scholar might read ancient Hebrew. He doesn't speak those languages. I don't need to be perfectly honest. The Arab culture, civilization currently doesn't produce anything worth me learning the language for, the modern language. But this book, yeah, sure, I'll learn it for this. So I went through the book, and I also have a technology background, so I'm quite analytical as well. So I developed a methodology, a hermeneutical methodology, by which I basically went through these, what I would call sore thumb words, these words that you read and you go, the definition for these words come from this other literature, and yet the Quran itself is claiming to be complete. It's claiming to be from God. It's claiming that you can understand it. And when you talk to brand Muslims, they'll say, "Oh no, you can't understand it without this other literature." And you say, "Have you tried?" No. And of course, they've never tried. So I thought, I don't know. Perhaps I was just too ignorant to realize that it couldn't be done, but I just decided to do it. And yes, it does take an awful lot of time. I spent 3.5, 4 years doing 18 hours a day, doing nothing else but working with this text and going through the text. Just take one term. I realized that you can tell from all of the context, from the totality of the context, what this word means. And I'd actually come across somebody called Bedrich Hrozny, who was a linguist who translated the Hittite libraries, which were discovered, I think, about the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. So he translated the whole library of stuff for which there were no dictionaries. So this was a dead language, and he did it by using his intelligence. Now, this isn't something which is particularly popular in the Islamic world, you see. And I mean, other than sort of just memorizing stuff, and I mean actually coming to it and applying yourself in a creative way. And what he'd done is he went through this whole library of words and discovered the most popular word, the most oft recurring word, and he thought this was an agrarian society, so this word must mean bread, which it did. And by applying this method of what I call pan-textual analysis, he was able to divine the meanings for these words. And I was in a situation where it was much easier than anything he had to do, but because the general outline is clear. We have these Arabic words, and if you know anything about Arabic, the root system is extremely useful in understanding, unpicking words which have been twisted. So I had various tools at my disposal, and that's what I did, and that's what my work is. And it presents. I have a hermeneutical system, which is this pantextual, in part, this pantextual method. It's not to say that that the Quran meets with moderns' expectations of how God should be, but I can defend and Quranically the definitions of the words that I use, and I bring all of that evidence in my work, and I give that work away for free, which is also quite a pleasure, quite honestly, because it means that anyone with an internet connection can download it and go through my evidence themselves and reach their own conclusions. I'm not. The last thing I would say, and I think is one of, if I may say so, my what I consider my achievements is this work can be improved upon by other people without the need for everyone to go around killing each other. It's a scientific method, and as I invite people to beat it, and if anybody does, and it's superior to what I've done, I'll read their work. It's not about I'm not creating a cult. I'm just using my brain.
So with the Quran now translated so that it is very clear for anybody to read or listen to the audiobook version that you've provided, was that easier I know you're not a Flat Earth channel, although you have a couple of Flat Earth videos. Was it easier for you to see the aspects of the Quran which talk about and refer to the Earth not being a globe?
That's a good question. Yeah, I suppose so. I think after meeting Dave and then going through this 300-hour process, I was actually in the process of working on the text at that time. I then went through the Quran and looked afresh at everything that it says, and all the language it uses is fundamentally, definitely confirms what you might call the ancient Jewish conception of the heavens and the earth. Flat, it talks in Arabic, madda means to flatten. God flattened. It talks about a carpet laid out, and it's one of the bases on which the Quran, since the Enlightenment, has been criticized, is because it does give us a flat Earth model. And as I went through all of the verses relating to this, I thought, this absolutely confirms it. It talks about windows of heaven, foundations of the deep. It talks about the sky built firmly. The verb used means to build, and a structure. It's a structure. And that on the day of judgment, at the end of, when the hour comes, this will crack. How can something crack? That if it's boundless space, it's not possible for it to crack. And so all of the language is confirms this model. When I just looked at it, that's correct, and it does. And I do have a video on that about how it confirms. I'm sure we've all seen on various videos and images of the Hebrew, ancient Hebrew conception of the firmament, the waters above, the waters of the deep, the pillars of the earth, the windows of heaven. This is the Quran. I mean, Christians like to say the Quran is based on the Bible and so on. The Quran itself would disagree with that. It says that it does confirm previous revelations, but it also corrects it. It corrects where previous revelations have been twisted and lost and so forth. So, but the Quran certainly confirms that model. Whether you like it, you don't like it, that's what it confirms. Now, there are, and I can understand why, what you might call modernizing Islamic influences, who've seen how backward their own, and let's be honest, their cultures are way backward. And the reason is because they've been following this hadith stuff, which, if you don't know, in the traditionalist Islamic world, the word innovation, which in the West is, you're thinking Steve Jobs, all this amazing stuff, innovation, bid'ah. You say that in Arabic, you can end up with a knife in your back. So any kind of innovation in this kind of culture is when people who want to do stuff, they want to kind of up and go to America. It's very difficult to do anything, and they don't produce anything because they're there's a line in YouTube song, something about you glorify the past when the future dries up, and this is they're kind of stuck in the medieval, conflation of pagan religion, made up stories, old traditions, blah blah blah, and they call this Islam, and that's why I haven't gone anywhere for the last 500 years. But the book, they have managed to preserve the book, and that book, the Quran, which I take as if I'd found it in a box in the ground somewhere. That book, this is what I deal with, and so I have to kind of critique brand Islam because I'm encroaching on what it considers its territory, but I'm not really primarily interested in it. It's just something I have to put up with, because you can't talk about the Quran. Everyone says, "Oh well, Islam," and I'm sort of saying, "Well, maybe not." But this book, the Quran, it confirms this. Although modernizing Muslims, trying to distance themselves and correctly understanding that their own cultures are backward and not going anywhere, have thought, well, the West is this scientific place. We have to try and interpret the Quran in a scientific way. And whilst we talked about intentions earlier, whether or not they were good or bad, let's assume they were good. The Quran, the Quran says what it says, and a plain reading of the text, no pun intended, it's talking about a plane. It just is.
It seems sometimes I feel I'm on a mission to help wake people up by just doing interviews and introducing people to new people they might not know of, who may have bigger channels than I do, or smaller, but just to get more information out there and spreading it across the plane. And then sometimes I think that's a losing battle. Waking up the world, that's never going to happen. Well, you yourself, from watching your videos, are not a big believer in the saying that if everyone wakes up, we can have a better future. You don't think really it's a numbers game. You believe it's about quality, not quantity, right?
Absolutely right. And that's why I make boring videos.
They're not boring, by the way.
I don't use pictures. I don't use twirly bits. I don't use Kim Kardashian. I don't use clips. It's just me talking. And you're right. I don't believe in we've been fed this idea of democracy, the idea that if enough people believe something, then everything's going to change for the better. It's a nice story. It's the sort of thing you would tell a child, isn't it? But you have to remember who's telling you this story, and who's telling you this story is the elite, and the elite form 0.0001% of the population. And if anybody knows that it isn't true, they do. So you got to sit and ask yourself, if you can really understand that the Earth is not a spinning ball, and you can understand all these other things, why would you assume the conclusions that have been fed to you all through your life about this big numbers thing? I mean, if people were rational and intelligent, they wouldn't have given us so-called democracy. Anyway, the Quranic model is completely different. The Quranic model is not everybody gets together and sings Kumbaya, drinking Coca-Cola, looking off into some starry distance, and awaiting the arrival of Savior X. That isn't how it happens. The Quranic model is usually one man. In fact, all the Quranic prophets and messengers, they're all male. And don't blame me, I didn't write the Quran, but this fact: a man, either alone or with a family or with a small number of followers, warns the elite. They don't bother with the main people, because it's taken as axiomatic in the Quranic text that the people are ruled, that people obey their rulers. And if you look around you with all the people, isn't it amazing that everybody's unique today? How absolutely uniform they all are. They're all unique in exactly the same way. So people are pretty much ruled. The new form of rulership allows people the illusion of choice, but they don't really have a choice. I mean, we discussed this, before we came on, that we've both read Nudge by Cass Sunstein, and this is the new fluffy dictatorship people are under. So they have this illusion of choice, but they don't really make any real choices. They will go along with their nudges and their pushes and all the rest of it. And the Quran, deals with a situation where people are basically ruled by an elite, and that elite is addressed and warned in the same way as we have, I think in America you call them the Miranda laws. You have the right to remain silent.
Your Miranda rights. Yeah.
Miranda rights. The Quran considers itself a warning, and once you've been warned, you are, like with Miranda rights, you're now in a different, legally you're in a different territory. And if you've been warned by a police officer, now anything that you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. It's similar here. And so this is the methodology. It's nothing to do with large amounts of people all waking up and downloading the right app at the right time and singing Kumbaya. As I said, irrelevant. It's small numbers of people. This is the Quranic methodology. Now, do I like it? Do I not like it? Let's say I don't like it. It's scary, but it is what it is. It says what it says, and it isn't pushing a caliphate. I mean, it just isn't. The word caliphate doesn't occur in the Quran, not anywhere. It just isn't there. But this method is what Muhammad, the recipient of the Quran, was expecting and following. Now, usually the model is, let's take Noah. This is somebody that everybody, Christian and Muslims, can agree upon, so it's kind of safe. Noah went to the elite of his day. He warned them. He was ignored. He was ridiculed. He was rejected. He built the ark, and they were all destroyed. Scary, isn't it? It's actually terrifying. But this is the model. And really what you have with the Quran, with Brand Islam, it's a little bit like, I'm sorry if it sounds offensive, but it's a little bit like a monkey with keys to a BMW. They know they've got something good, but they don't really know what it does. Well, this is what it does. It's like, this is a machine. It's a protocol. And that's how it works. And all I did was read this with my brain engaged. And I'm getting a lot of traction from intelligent people who follow my stuff. And yes, I don't have this huge following. I think my videos they are quite dry, because what I'm about is getting people to do the research. Because if I get bumped off, what I want is enough people out there who've read my work and understood it, that it doesn't matter. So killing me isn't going to make a difference, because whether I do it or somebody else does it doesn't make any difference to me. I'm just doing my job the best that I can. But that is the mechanism, and whether I like it, I don't like it, and believe me, I've walked around thinking, with this in my mind, and I don't like it. I wish there was some nicer way of doing it. I wish the way that it all worked was, see, I come from a liberal background, right? My parents and all that. That Sam does this very interesting piece of work, and then he gets interviewed by the Guardian, the Telegraph, and then feted on all of these TV shows and blah 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 blah. Everybody would think it was wonderful, but this isn't the method. It's not going to be like this for me, I'm pretty sure. So I'm just doing my job. And to go back to what we talked about earlier, I'm not a replacement mullah for anybody. I'm not offering my services. What I'm doing is trying to demonstrate what can happen if you do use your brain. You don't give up. You don't buy into this lie. You speak the truth. You do your work. And see, this is something that people don't want to do. This generation particularly, they don't realize how much of this, yourself. You do a channel. You have to do. You have to set up shows and deal with all the stuff. It's just work. People don't want to work. It's work. I mean, look at Noah building the ark, right? It's work. It's just work every day. And that's a large part of it. So I'm trying to give an example of that, but I'm not here to sort of start a religion or anything along those lines. I'm trying to explain that this book, it's a protocol, it's a warning, it's a series of promises, and it's good news for the believers, and it's not good news for those who reject. But it's not rejecting Islam, this made-up thing, and I can prove it. I can demonstrate it very quickly. I mean, for example, it says about Abraham, that he was Muslim. He submitted to God. And I would say, well, if you're saying that Islam is this religion you've got, what was he? Was he a Sunni or was he a Shia? Of course, he could be neither, because none of these existed at those times. So Brand Islam it makes claims it can't maintain. Now, the Quran does stand up to the analysis that I've done as a revelation from God, but brand Islam does not survive the process.
Very interesting. And I think it's really great that people who don't know much about this, including myself, now know the difference between the book, the Quran, and the religion of Islam. You did an excellent video about beating the New World Order at its own game. And the video is called Purity. If you can remember, you've done many videos. If you can remember about that, it kind of is a catch-all for all the things that have gone wrong with this world. Can you give us a brief overview of this video, Purity? I think it's really a good one for people to watch.
Well done, Patricia. You've really done your homework. It's
It wasn't even homework. I really enjoy your channel. So
that's very kind of you. Purity is something which I think people have lost track of. And I got to say, as a caveat, I didn't start off like this. I was as big an idiot as anybody. Okay, in my 20s and 30s, yeah, I was conditioned, womanizing, all of this stuff. So I'll just get that out of the way. Okay, my life, I repented, and I went in a different road, a route that's pleasing to God, and anyone can do that. Okay,
you grew up around that. I'm a little older than you, but we grew up around the time when it was the 70s and then the 80s, and it was. I think every generation has that time when you're in those younger ages where it's sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and plenty of it, and more, please.
It's sold to you as something which is somehow risque, dangerous, and amazing,
and a rite of passage. You have to sow your wild oats when you're young.
And this is not true. And as I've discovered that actually the morality, see, our forebears, they weren't moral because they were great. They were great because they were moral. The morality that they had, that is so mocked by this liberal, degenerate, perverse, and disgusting generation, is what made them strong. Just for example, when a man decides to contain himself sexually and to dedicate himself to God, he acquires strength. He'll be tested, etc. But the difference between living in a society where that is accepted as the ideal, I'm not saying everybody always hits the mark, but I'm saying that was understood. And when you live in a society which says that masturbation, pornography, all these things, just do what you feel, you have to understand we're living now in a degenerate society. Society is degenerate, and this is what's the word? Demoralizing. And demoralization is a military strategy. This is a military takedown. If you can take down my message is mainly to young men. I mean, I know how many women watch my channel. It's about 20%, something like that. Mainly, it's men who watch my channel, and that's understandable, and I'm very happy with that, because I'm calling really men. I mean, if women watch it too, and they can learn something from it too. It's not like women can't watch it or anything, but fundamentally, I'm a man. I'm addressing other men. When you embrace purity, when you stop wasting your time, when you stop being a slave to the sex thing, when you learn to control your eyes, when you learn to, you will open up a vision that you didn't know about before, and you'll acquire strength that you didn't have before. I walk around, I see these young men, 20, 25 years old, so on and so forth. They are wasted. They are, excuse my French, they're masturbated out of their minds. They have got no staying power. They've got no strength. It's a bit like, almost like an engine on which the gasket has been just taken out. It's sort of, it's making a noise, but it hasn't got any pressure. Can't go anywhere. Haven't got any persistence. And persistence, patience, sabr in Arabic. You're not going to have it if you're wasting yourself. So purity in all its forms is actually the engine of change. And so when I see people who say, oh yeah, we're fighting the New World Order, and oh yeah, we're doing this, and oh yeah, we're doing that, but they're living a degenerate lifestyle, I know it's a lie.
And it's not just keeping a handle on or keeping the lid on masturbatory urges and not watching porn. It's the food. It's the movies that you watch. I'm not talking about those kind of movies. It's the entertainment that you take in. It's all of these negative influences, and keeping yourself pure by just saying, no thanks, that's not for me.
That's right. And also, sort of, I think men are designed to fight a holy mission, or at least men like me are designed that way. Richard Dawkins actually is fighting his own, he's a professional atheist. He's fighting his own holy mission as well. Part of where this generation is lost is it hasn't got a war to fight. You need a mission. And when you embrace one and you become sort of centered around that, all the extraneous stuff kind of falls away. And I agree that it is bigger than just sex. It is, but sex is central to it. And if you can control that, and then the tongue, and just gaining mastery over yourself, and to become, it's an old word. See, these words are all laughed at. I was going to say devout. When you become devout, when you become righteous, there's another word which sounds, everyone go ha 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 ha.
Well, when people say, you're not seeing anybody, you're not having sex, don't you have needs? Well, even talking about that kind of stuff makes me uncomfortable. And the rampant drinking that happens, and the smoking, drugs, swearing. I've been called old fashioned or prudish, I guess, but I see that as I'm not perfect, by the way, but I see it as a virtue, and I see it as, like what you're saying. It's a noble thing to do. It's what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and that's what we're being trained out of. And those words, the word you used, virtue, I mean, from a sort of an elite point of view, they have a very different interpretation of that word, which goes back to Plato, and they would see virtue in a different way. But these words, virtue, righteousness, and so on, have become, they've been branded in a way that almost makes them laughable. But these are the keys to a productive life. And I know, as I said when I started this, I have something I can compare, because I've lived both. It's not that I think it was Oscar Wilde, perhaps, he said every saint has a past, every sinner has a future, something like that. So I was brought up this way. I mean, I remember being told as a young man, oh, lots of women are going to like you and blah blah blah, and think as though that was my only way of achieving. And for men, you see, in this society, they're lost. They're completely lost. There are only two ways that men really can achieve any kind of mastery over their environment nowadays, and it's through driving and screwing. That's kind of it, because the wars are all fought. It's all been industrialized. It's been outsourced to bombers and drones. A man is looking for a team, and he's looking for a mission, and he hasn't got either. So you've got these almost surrogates like video games and all of this stuff, watching sports, where you can, and the elite gave us these for a reason. They understand. These things are basically, excuse me for the expression again, but masturbatory pastimes.
Yes. Playing sports like people did before the advent of televised sports, that's great. It's good for your body and good for your mind and good for companionship. But televised sports, you're rooting for your team as if you're the one out there on the field. And the truth is, you're not.
No, that's right. And it's a way of getting rid of all of those pent-up tribal and spiritual juices, for want of a better expression, without producing anything. And that's why fundamentally people who do that, they fall flat afterwards and they need another fix. Similar thing. When you, as a man, death is not the most terrifying thing. The most terrifying thing is dying without having completed your mission. And that's what I've discovered. But through, and you will be tried in it. There's no easy way. See, people want, I get letters all the time, I really want to do what's right, but I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of that, I'm afraid of the other. Yeah, join the club. That's how it works. It's supposed to be an epic. This is an odyssey. You're fighting your own personal odyssey. You're going to have to be, this is why you have to, you have to slay the dragon, slay the Hydra. This is the path. And there isn't an easy way to do it. There just isn't. But this is the best. That's what I found.
The best and the purest. So everyone should check the video out called Purity. One last question, and it's probably going to be a long answer. I hope so anyway. You did a couple of videos on your health, and you mentioned that you're 51. And by the way, you look great. Your skin looks good. You look very, very healthy. But at one time, you felt something was wrong inside your body. And you also mentioned earlier that you don't want to look, you'll look into flat earth, you'll look into the Quran, you'll look into Islam, but you don't really want to look into the science of the human body. That's just, no. So you checked yourself into a health facility, but not one of those kind of fancy spas. This was a hardcore place where you were basically beaten back into health. You taking matters into your own hands, I think that is admirable, and it's an old-fashioned thing to do. Tell people about this journey you had.
It's called My Wife, and bless her, she's really, in a lot of ways, part of the foundation of this. Yeah, people don't see her, but without my wife, none of this would be happening. There's no question about it. And she has an interest in health. She always has, and she has sort of, I don't want to say nagged, because that's not, she's not that sort of person.
She suggests.
Suggested, yes. She sort of gently and winningly tried to prod me in the right direction of doing the right thing health-wise for myself. And I never really took it seriously, and I always felt bad. I mean, I felt bad since I was about 30. So, as I say, for the last sort of 20 years or so, I just felt, especially my stomach area, just felt awful. And she has tried to help me, and she's done various things, but fundamentally I was just about keeping the wolf from the door, health-wise, as it were. And I'd pretty much made peace with the fact I was probably going to die quite soon, and I wanted to finish my work. And so I pushed myself with my work and just pushed and pushed and pushed, and it became the thing. I just wanted to help her, get her settled and our child, and I wanted to finish this work. And that was it. If I could complete those two things, that would be enough for me. Hadn't really occurred to me that I might got to live past this. Anyway, long story short, she has spent a lot of time. She's Russian, and she's got this sort of crazy Russian take on things, and various, it means that we've got access to this whole Russian health thing, which is different to the West in some ways. And so through various people, anyway, she put me in touch with this person. I was exhausted, and I was dying. I knew I was dying. You just know. And I don't mean I was dying like immediately, but I knew that I was exhausted all of the time. I was doing videos and trying to finish my work and trying to look after a child and the rest of it. But I was just felt awful. I couldn't concentrate. Even making a video, it was horrible. It was just horrible, and it went on for years. Anyway, she got hold of this place in Azerbaijan, and I went. I was exhausted before I even left. I was even more exhausted when I arrived. This is Azerbaijan, okay? So I have to say this. You may not know, but some of your British audience might know what Fawlty Towers is.
Oh, I know the sitcom, the television show.
I would describe this place as a cross between Fawlty Towers and Belsen. It's it wasn't a Western sanatorium or anything like that. It was all very unpleasant procedures, which started unpleasantly and got progressively worse throughout the day.
So basically torture.
It was harsh. It was harsh, brutal, painful, lonely. I didn't eat for a month. I think all I had was water with honey in it.
So you were there for about almost like 30 days, right?
I was there for 30 days. And when I arrived, I wasn't even convinced that this was, because I kind of thought I was going on holiday. I didn't have a full idea of where I was going. My wife handled the details, you see. And when I realized that this place doesn't have a beach, I was just basically on a kushetka. I don't know what this is called in English. Kushetka is like one of those, it's basically a hospital bed.
Like a cot. I think we called it a cot.
Yeah. Okay. One of those. and I was brutalized for about 6 to 8 hours a day. The highlight of my day was I had to go out and walk for an hour and a half, which I did.
In the videos you discussed this, there was, if people know what cupping is, these
but not
60 of them all over your body in one of your videos in a picture. I mean,
something like that. But this is brutal cupping. This isn't sort of
Gwyneth Paltrow in some.
Not Gwyneth Paltrow cupping. I have come across her, which has got 4 or 5 very petite, delicate little marks on her back. No, I'm talking about you look like something out of Star Trek. Okay.
Right.
These things, and it is brutally painful.
12 octopus attacked you.
Oh man, and you crying with pain. Okay, I just decided after the first day, because even though it really hurt like hell, I thought I actually feel a little bit better, and I just decided whatever they throw at me, I'm going to stick at it. I'm just gonna put up with everything, and that's what I did. You
talked about massage where they're like pummeling you with like their fists almost.
Some of that, yeah. There's the beatings. The beating is quite easy actually compared to some of them. But after a while, I just adapted to, this is my reality for now. I'm just going to stick at it and stick at it and stick at it, and I did. And I suppose I have some details. A lot of enemas, a lot of purges, a lot of leeches.
Real leeches.
Oh yeah, leeches were light. Leeches compared to the rest of it. Leeches, I'd done leeches before, but yeah, leeches were just minor inconvenience compared to the rest of it. Something which is called, I can't remember, akutovanie, I think it was in Russian. Can't remember what it'd be in English. Where you basically take a very hot bath, then they wrap you up in plastic, then they wrap you up in blankets, and you just sweat like a pig for, I think it's an hour. Then you have another hot bath. Then you do it for another hour. I can't remember. I think it was 120 hours. In these things, just sweating and sweating and sweating. It's all unpleasant, all of it, except for the parts which are unspeakably horrible. However, it absolutely changed me. I mean, physically, I had all this orange stuff coming out of me, and this is cancer. I had first stage cancer. I haven't got it anymore.
That is what you were told when you were there, that you would probably have died of cancer within 5 years had you not come for treatment.
I said, how long would if I hadn't come? And she said about 5 years. And since then, I am still on an extremely limited diet. I mean, my food is weighed. I eat 300 grams of food. That's it. Each time I eat, it's very specific food, etc., etc. But honestly, Patricia, there's no comparison. I mean, I don't have shares in this company or anything like that. I'm just sharing my experience, and it is brutal. It's brutal. This isn't somewhere you go and you're going to just enjoy it. No, you're going to hate it. If you like it, they're not doing it right.
Do you think you might have had stomach cancer? Because you said that you had stomach issues.
Yeah, it was a whole load of stuff. And basically, your health, as she explained it, and I agree with her, it's like the QE2. The QE2 is this huge ship, famous ship in England, the Queen Elizabeth II. You're turning around a huge ship. You don't turn it around in 5 minutes. So what I went through was just basically at least turning the wheel so the ship starts. When a ship turns around, it takes a couple of nautical miles to turn around. When you turn the wheel, it doesn't suddenly do a sudden 3-point turn and there you are. You have to turn this thing around, and this thing starts to turn it round. So that, and then now what I've been doing for 6 months is cleaning my blood, through various means, drinking lemons and blah, 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 blah. I live a very regimented life, but I sleep great.
It's about purity, another form of purification.
It is another form of purity.
I love purification things. I'm a big fan.
I gave up coffee as well, which I liked coffee. I wasn't a big drinker of it, but I used to have 1 or 2 cups every single day. And getting caffeine, and I have sugar. I haven't had sugar in any form. I can't remember, the last 7 months ago, 8 months ago, something like that.
But you still will eat fruit. You're talking about other sorts.
Oh yeah, no, I'm talking about manufactured sugar.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good to avoid.
300 grams, something like that of that. And so I eat quite often, but I have very small amounts. And just in terms of weight, I was in American, I think I've lost 28 pounds. Sorry.
That's a fair amount.
And it's 5 inches off my stomach. All of that bloated feeling just gone. I'm trim again. I look better physically than I did when I was 30, quite honestly. So it's not that I'm this is like one of my key things that I concentrate on in my channel. I was really explaining to my audience, because I was getting emails, hey, are you have you been killed? Did
Are
they
you all right?
yeah,
Well, it's
But
good though. I like channels that share part of their personal story when they're sharing the main focus of their information. It humanizes them and makes me more interested in their content.
and I am just, as I hope is abundantly clear, I'm just a normal guy. I'm just, I've got the stresses and strains of anybody else, and I had a health issue, and I've, it's been fixed, thank God, and I'm all right with the fact that I'm going to die one day, whenever it comes, sooner or later. But if you have the option of being healthy in the meantime, then take it, and I have, and I'm very grateful. And again, this is full credit to my wife, without whose persistent suggestions, I wouldn't have done this.
And you're going back to that health facility a couple more times, I heard you say.
I'm
shorter treatments.
Much shorter treatment.
Tune-ups maybe for the QE2.
Yeah. After this big one, I go back, I think in February, something like that, for 10 days, and then 6 months after that for 10 days, and then every year just for 10 days. And I would rather do that than see the inside of a cancer ward, myself personally.
I agree completely. So we've covered a lot of ground. I wanted to make sure to touch on a lot of different aspects of your channel. I hope I've done your channel due. However, for those who want more information, Sam's channel is linked in the description box below. Is there anything I haven't covered that you want to get across to those who are viewing Sam?
I think I'll just say that if you, if anything that I've said has resonated with you, I think people often underestimate their own intuitions and their own inner guide. It doesn't mean that all of our emotions should be trusted, etc. But there'll be some core. If you're over 20 by now, you've discovered your core, things that have stayed central to you no matter what your circumstances are. If something is true, it will be true within this core. And embracing who you are, what God made you to be, that's important. And I think that we often, when people subsume themselves into groups, they often lose track of that. And if you feel that you've lost track of that, of your core, whether it's through work, marriage, religion, whatever it is, spending time alone without distractions, going for a walk and really thinking about things is a good way to go, because ultimately we are going to have to give account for what we did with what we had. And that's really what I say to people. It's not about necessarily agreeing with everything that all the conclusions that I've come to, but we will be asked about what we did with what we had. And it is true that if you want good trees, you should plant good seeds. It's just the way it works.
I love that. And that's generally how you sign off your videos. Now, usually I go into the live chat and greet everybody, and I've kind of been so involved in talking with you, I haven't. So I'm just going to say a generic hello to everybody in the live chat. Please subscribe to Sam's channel and give this video a thumbs up. Sam, it has been a true pleasure talking to you. I can't believe that I hadn't known about your channel all this time that I've been involved in Flat Earth. It came to me because I was talking with Robbie Davidson, who is his channel is called Celebrate Truth, and he puts on a Flat Earth conference. And he was saying in the future he would like to have somebody who would discuss the Quran, so it's not just a fully Christian conference. But he didn't really know anybody, and I said, "Oh, I don't either." And then somebody sent me your channel, and then I just started diving in, and I told Robbie about you as well. So I do think that it's great for those who don't really know much about anything aside from the Bible to learn more. And you've definitely taught me more. And thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, Patricia. I've really enjoyed it. It's been great.
It's Sam Gerrans, concluding episode number 259 of Flat Earth and Other Hot Potatoes. Thank you for being here, and keep it flat.